A lot of investors in Chinese securities are getting increasingly worried about the escalating tensions between China and the US. And this is what's been really the overhang on these securities in this past quarter, which is also a quarter where the country reopened, and all signs are pointing to a strong quarterly results for Alibaba that reports in the next couple of days on May 15th, I believe. And so I got some really good news for you. It looks like some of those tensions are de-escalating with a couple of meetings that happened over the past week, and so that's what I'm going to cover in this video. And so guys, as you smash that like button, let me run that intro. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now I know a lot of you guys are asking for an Alibaba earnings preview, which I will put out. I'm going to try and put that out tomorrow. So if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so that you're notified when that video becomes available. But let's dive right into this particular article. So this was reported in the Wall Street Journal just a couple of days ago, or yesterday actually, and they started off very strong. The US and China are finally taking steps again, and of course, yeah, there's going to be mistrust. I think the biggest issue is that there's just going to be a fundamental disagreement on certain things. For example, the sovereignty of Taiwan. But I don't think either country is going to make any drastic moves in relation to it. And, even the people in Taiwan are looking to just maintain the status quo. I've shown that data on this channel previously. The vast majority of people in Taiwan just want to maintain the status quo. And so turning to the article, the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who we are all pretty much familiar with because I've talked about him many times on this channel, he met for more than 8 hours of talks with China's top foreign affairs official Wang Yi, and I'll get into more of that detail in a second. And then there was a second meeting with U.S. Ambassador Nicholas Burns, who met with Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Zhang and Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wintao in the recent days. And so let's dive into these and let's see exactly what came out of it. Now, it's not all positive, right? You're not going to get a flurry of good news. It's always a little bit good, a little bit bad, because there's fundamental disagreements. However, it's nice to see that the countries are trying to work together, and that's what you want to see. And so starting with our good friend Jake Sullivan. So Jake Sullivan actually held unannounced talks with his Chinese counterpart in Vienna as Washington and Beijing try to reset high-level contracts and keep relations from further spiraling downwards. Now, what exactly are they talking about? Well, you guys might remember that I previously put out a video where there's seemingly escalating tensions between the China and the US, and that's really been an overhang on the securities. You can see Alibaba is bobbing around that $80 per share area when we're getting all this information suggesting that it's going to be a great quarter. And so in their meeting, it looks like they discussed all of the critical issues. So for example, the war in Ukraine, Taiwan, and I would think that those are I would agree with the Wall Street Journal that those are two issues that are at the center of the tensions between both governments. I would say that the other issue that they didn't mention that was discussed that would also be at the center of tensions for the both governments would be the US's stance on allowing China to get access to specific chips. And so China right now does not have access to the most advanced chips in the world. And so here's a very positive sign. China's government news agency Xinhua, guys, correct me in the comments on how to pronounce that, said that the talks aimed to remove obstacles to promoting Sino-US relations, stop the fall, and stabilize them. And so that's really good, right? So, it's always good when the Chinese news agencies are saying that, the Americans are stepping up to the plate to ensure that the relations are stabilized and potentially even improve. That's kind of what we're looking for here. But I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm going to try to be as unbiased as I possibly can. And so here's the second meeting. Qin Zhang, he held up his respect for essentially the red lines. And, really what he's saying is that they are not comfortable with the stance that the U.S. has recently taken on Taiwan. Previous administrations have, tried to maintain the status quo. This administration, at least currently, has moved more in the direction of an independent Taiwan, and of course that angers the Chinese. And so the way that this second meeting was reported is that the fact that the meeting between the foreign minister and the U.S. ambassador took place at all can be viewed as a sign of progress, given the fact that they've had such limited communication between the countries. And here's an interesting part. In the Chinese readout, Mr. Quinn said stabilizing US-China ties was an urgent task to prevent accidents between the countries without elaborating. And so, is that a threat? I don't know, but it just seems like an interesting type of statement. But yeah, you know what? Let's not have accidents and let's not create international incidences between two of the most powerful nations in the world. Now, Mr. Quinn actually did go pretty hard against the US, and this is not a problem. You want to know exactly what your counterparts are thinking in an effort to sort of stabilize relations. And so here's what he said. A series of erroneous words and actions by the US have undermined the hard-won positive momentum of the US-China relations. I hope that the US side will deeply reflect and will work with China to steer US-China relations out of difficulties and put them back on the right track. So it sounds like they're willing to work. This is better news than I think what many people were expecting this soon after tensions continue to escalate. And, does this mean that the share price of Alibaba or many of the Chinese names start to recover a little bit? Well, if the share prices declined as a result of escalating tensions, if tensions are de-escalating, one would assume that they would go up, but I wouldn't bank on it. Like, I wouldn't be purchasing call options or anything right now. I always focus on downside risk, and I think you guys should too as well. And part of that is diversifying your portfolio in such a way that you don't have a material exposure into China anyways. Like I've said for many, many years, I guess maybe 2 years now, that my exposure to Chinese investments is around 10% and getting lower and lower as time goes on, as I'm adding more capital into the portfolio. Now, the question on everybody's mind is that can China or will they invade Taiwan? And so, I think Taiwan still remains at the heart of the conflict between the two nations. I'm not an expert. I can't even spell the word expert, but I don't think China invades. I think the global sanctions would destroy their economy, and essentially what they're saying here is obviously China's military dwarfs Taiwan's military, and so they could easily take control, especially if the US and other nations don't intervene. But here's the problem: the war on Ukraine actually provided an essential template for how other companies can cripple a country's economy with sanctions. And so, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing, where you can't just let China invade Taiwan. Not that they would anyways. I don't think they would personally. That's just my opinion. But, if you do put huge sanctions against China, it does impact your own country as well, because there's a lot of goods and products that you're purchasing from China. And so at least temporary, or at least on a temporary basis, your population would feel the pain as well. I mean, we didn't feel a material amount of pain with the sanctions that were put against Russia because we just don't export or import quite a lot of stuff from there. Maybe oil for the European countries, but they didn't put sanctions on that, I don't think. And so, it would be tough, but it would be necessary. And so I just don't think it would be good news for any country involved. And ultimately, over the long term, it would crush the Chinese economy, I think. And then if you're crushing the Chinese economy, things are already tough there. Like, let's not forget that they still have a large unemployment issue. They still have that property crisis. If their currency collapses as a result of this, how do they get out of the problems that they have? And then does the CCP's rule come under question by the Chinese citizenry? So I just don't think it's a good move. But once again, I'm not an economic or political expert when it comes to China. I just read what I read. I know a little bit, and so I can just opine on what I know. And so, Joe Biden said that my expectation is that it will not happen. It will not be attempted. It's important for the world leaders to send a strong message that there will be consequences if Beijing does try something. And they know that. They absolutely know that. Why would they? They do so well with working in conjunction with the global economy. And I think the opinion from the Chinese almost is that it's like the US is like baiting them into this war. That's kind of the way they think about it, or at least that's how I've read that they think about it. I don't think they are looking to make any moves that would put them into hot water with the global economic community, because at the end of the day, it hurts them the most. So with that said, what does the quarter coming up look like? I think, notice how the exports are up post reopening, but there are challenges that remain to the economy. You almost have a tale of two winds, I guess. You got a tailwind of the China reopening, but you have the headwind of cooling global growth. So what does that mean to results? Well, I think Q1 results are going to be really good, but I think we're going to have muted guidance into, we're going to have muted guidance going forward for the remainder of 2023. So we'll see how that plays out. Now for Alibaba, this should be their fourth quarter of the year, and then they'll provide us with guidance for their next fiscal year, and so we'll see what that looks like. But I just think visibility is not that good in this environment, and so I don't expect the share price to rally materially. However, I think there's a lot of pessimism built into the current share price. I don't think that it should be trading at $80 a share. I think it should be closer to 100. So, I mean, could you get a rally from, 85 to 100? Yeah, absolutely you can. But, you're not going to see anything going to like 150 or beyond. So I want to know what you guys think. Let me know how you think the results are going to turn out in the comments below. But also let me know what you think about the improving relations between the US and China. Do these countries enter into a conflict, and when does that happen? Also, guys, the other thing that I do want to point out once again is that I will be releasing an Alibaba earnings preview, and so if you haven't subscribed and rung that notification bell, please do that now. Also, the Q&A series on this channel is probably the best work that I do, and if you haven't seen the Q&A series at all, no problem, I'll link it right here.